Hello everyone, Nathan here. This is our second half of the Q&A for the new release of A Saga on Home Video 2nd Edition. That of course is Volume 1, dealing with the live-action films on physical media prior to the Disney era, like 2015 and before. Then we have Volume 2, dealing with the Disney era stuff, 2016 onward, when it comes to live-action films, and then everything else being covered, whether it's cartoons, behind the scenes, or whatever, in Volume 3. This is that 3-volume 2nd edition, available in Kindle and paperback and hardback formats over on Amazon.com, at a price point on Kindle of $14.99 per volume, in paperback format as $29.99 per volume, and in a premium color as opposed to standard color hardback sort of luxury edition at $59.99 per volume. Those are all out at this point. I do not have finished hardback copies to show you in my hands yet. They're still a few days away. They take a longer time to be put together, but I finally have a chance to record here after a crazy couple of weeks with my wife getting COVID and now isolating in our bedroom at this point while my son is asleep in his. I've been sleeping in his room with him so she can isolate. We are now at a point here where I feel like the question timing, the number of questions coming in have trickled down enough that we can actually address the second half of the Q&A for the launch of A Saga on Home Video 2nd Edition. So in the hardback launch video, which is the last time I did a video specifically about A Saga on Home Video, that is when we did the first part of the Q&A. So if I happen to refer you back to anything, like somebody asked a question and I'm like, I already answered it, that is the video to check out. That was posted on December 21 of 2021, if you are curious, and the title is A Saga on Home Video 2nd Edition. That is 2ND period, hardcover launch and Q&A part 1. That's what the first video was called. I'm going to answer any questions here that were left in the comments on that video. If you have other comments about A Saga on Home Video beyond what I covered in that video or this one, feel free to ask in the comments. I will typically then answer in the comments themselves. I don't know that there's going to be a part 3 of the Q&A here because it seems like we covered a lot of ground with the questions from the last one and this one here. So we start with some questions from Joe Belich. The first one is, so here's a question overall that I'm not sure you'll go over in part 2's Q&A, but I'm curious, what involvement does your spouse have with your collecting hobby? Because I like to think it's much more than just moral support. I mean, has she purchased items from her income to help add to your collection? Or does she also do some research involved in your collecting hobby? No, not really. This is sort of my thing, essentially, my little hobby that I do mostly on my own. She does tend to load me up with Star Wars attire constantly, anytime I hit a birthday, or we hit Christmas, or anytime she finds some cool Star Wars stuff. So that's why you see me wearing that stuff all the time. She loads me up with it each year. So in that sense, it sort of plays into the videos a little bit because I tend to put on, geekdom attire before doing these, whether it's Star Wars or otherwise. But home video-wise, she really doesn't have much involvement in it. It's more of like an indulgence, essentially. She knows this is my thing, what I like to do. This is how I unwind, is doing the home video stuff. So basically, her biggest contribution is time and making sure that basically, usually, when we're not in crazy times, I'm working during the week, she's working during the week. On the weekend, she has a day where she is able to do what she needs to do. She spends time with her dad, going about, seeing a movie or running around and running errands and stuff like that, just getting out of the house for a bit. And then on Sundays, typically, or Saturday, depending on whether she works the weekend or not, we will all have lunch together, including her dad coming over to eat lunch together. And then while she and her dad are with our son, with Cade, that is when it opens up the possibility for me to come in and record. Or when I was working on the book, to basically plop down in my office on the floor and take tons of pictures with my little photo box and such to get those ready for the book. So it's mostly that kind of support. When it comes to actually buying things, I don't know that she's ever bought something for the collection. But you got to understand, I'm not an easy person to buy for when it comes to stuff that I am rabidly fanboy about, whether it's the Star Wars home video stuff, certain games, and stuff like that. Like, she'll get a video game for me, perhaps, if I haven't pre-ordered it already. Board games, because she doesn't quite ever know what I might be interested in, so she usually holds off on that. But when it comes to the Star Wars home video stuff, I pre-order everything as stuff comes out, So she doesn't know what to get, and she wouldn't know what I have to be able to even guess at getting something for the most part. So instead, she'll go for other stuff like the clothing and whatnot. I will say that also part of it is from the financial side of things. I will tend to be like, hey, there's this thing, and it's gonna cost a lot. Are we cool with me going ahead and ordering this? This is how financially I think we are good to go, so it's okay for me to do it, but what do you think? Are you giving the nod? Not so much because I feel like I need permission so much as it's just the nice thing, the right thing to do. And in the back of my mind, there's what if she finds out you spent several $100s on a freaking home video item? Is she going to be pissed? She never has been. I doubt she ever would be, but that's certainly in the back of my mind. But it's a tricky thing for us to have her really involved even in that decision making from time to time because we don't keep our finances together. She was a victim of identity theft years ago. We're pretty sure from her estranged mother. And as a result of it, had to file bankruptcy and all this stuff. So, and it's happened multiple times. And it's even happened since then. We've had to get a lawyer involved in it. So with all that stuff having happened, ever since we've been married, we've just kept our finances separate. I pay the bulk of the bills. And when it comes to anything that she's contributing, she basically just gives me the money. And then I pay the bills with it. But it all goes through my side of things for the most part. So when it comes to any of my purchases, it's coming from an account that I control that I leave completely open to her, but she just doesn't usually care to look. She trusts me to keep the budget stuff together. Maybe it's the econ teacher in me and all that. But suffice to say, because of all those circumstances and how tough I am, to buy for when it comes to home video stuff, for the most part, she is very supportive of it. But the gift she gives and her biggest contribution to it is time to actually do it. And that I am very appreciative of. Because I can use time. Time is a fungible resource, right? I can use time to get this stuff done. I can use time to get some work stuff done to open up time later to do other stuff, like say when I was wanting to work on a Saga on home video. So that is a great gift, but it is the main primary contribution that she has made to the collecting process and to my Star Wars Timeline Gold when I was doing it for those 20 years, many of which were with her around. Or my podcasting days and whatnot, mostly at the indulgence of her being willing to let me just disappear into a room for hours at a time to record with Mark or with Michael and so on. So that's the main thing. Joe also asks, I just realized this kind of question. Would we ever see a DVD or Blu-ray or 4K even release of all of your YouTube videos? More than just a compilation disc, but have you also even considered making a fan documentary journey of your home video collecting odyssey? So I'm going to disappoint and say no across the board with that one. First off, I think it'd be odd doing a DVD of all of these videos, or Blu-ray or whatever it is, for a couple of reasons. One, because it's all freely viewable on YouTube. But two, because have you seen the quality of some of my earliest videos on this channel? It was for shit. It was horrible. The video quality of my early stuff from the Star Wars Home Video Library and before that was god-awful. So it wouldn't be something you'd want to watch on a big screen anyway. But if you wanted to, for most modern TVs, you could just cast it from YouTube onto the TV or use a YouTube app on a smart TV. So not really seeing a need there. As for a documentary of the journey, I feel like now it would all be retrospective. And that's not as interesting to me as if it was something documenting it during the time that it was happening. And that ship obviously has sailed, going on almost a decade ago. It'll be a decade ago next year, I guess, when I've really dove heavily into Star Wars home videos. So I don't see either of those necessarily happening. My journey, the journey that I care about, in a lot of ways, is the journey of the products themselves as I document in A Saga on home video. And I figure someone who wants to sort of see my personal journey of discovery and what I became interested and passionate about and what I hunted and when can watch A Saga on home video, or A Saga on home video, can watch from the Star Wars home video library in order from, episode 1 onward, basically. And then Mort Schumann asks, can't wait to get these hardcover versions. I may get the Kindle versions initially and then the hardcover later since, as you said, they'll never be unavailable as they're printed on demand. Would you ever consider offering signed versions of these? I really admire your dedication. It would be cool to have signed versions, but of course, it's not necessary, just a luxury / nice to have. So yes, sort of. So for the first edition, I did do signing stuff, not just signing when I happened to see somebody in person who had a copy of the book or brought a copy of the book, but actually did signed versions by mail. And it was a pain in the ass. Because what I would do is someone would send me money, I would order a copy, have it sent to me, sign it, then use the postage they've also paid, because they paid for the book, postage that they've also paid, to then take that signed copy and mail it to them. It was a pain in the butt, and just a very logistically weird situation to try to deal with. So I've come up with another solution for A Saga on Home Video 2nd edition. What I've done is I've gone into Photoshop and I have created templates for book plates. If you're not familiar with book plates, a book plate is basically a sticker or a label that you put inside a book that has been signed, so that the book itself isn't signed, but you have a signed thing to make it a signed edition by putting that book plate, that signed label, into the book itself. And my thought process is that I've got a couple of different versions of it. I've got a first edition one that is basically just, it says A Saga on Home Video, first edition, 2017, has like a little border around it like you'd see with a lot of Star Wars logos, and it says Nathan P. Butler at the bottom. And that's it. Nice open space, sign it, send it to someone through the mail. It's a label, it's like a mailing label type thing, about yay big. And they can put it right there into the book on the interior cover page. Just stick it in there. Now they've got a signed copy of the first edition. Now I've signed some of those before, so doing numbered signed copies doesn't make sense for the first edition. For the second edition, I haven't signed any yet. I'm starting at the ground floor. So for those, same design as it says second edition 2021. But then in the corners next to my name, instead of it just being my name, it's got these little like barred off areas for volume number, which I would write in manually, 1, 2, or 3, right? 1, 2, or 3, this kind of volume number. And then number of signed copy. So individually numbering every signed copy and doing that in matching sets of 3 labels at a time, 3 book plates at a time. So that if someone wants a signed run of all 3, I send them 3 signed book plates, all with the same matching individual number, and 1 for each volume. And do the same thing just without the numbering for the first edition. I'm in the process of getting that set up. The template is ready. I've printed out the first few pages of labels to be ready to go for that. I'm just waiting to offer it until I am positive that I can mail them, at least for the US in particular, that I can mail them with like 1 stamp, like how many stamps it would actually take to mail it out. I think it's just a 1 stamp kind of thing. Figure out what I need to do for international mailing, because I don't usually mail letters internationally, which is basically what this would be rather than a package. Do I need to do anything with that is special? And of course, we need to get to a point where I am able to logistically pull it off, which means that my wife, who's been sick, is better. I'm kind of having things calm down for work so I can actually manage that whole thing. But I think it would be as simple as someone sending me whatever price we arrange. Not really sure what it would be to cover in part the cost of labels and the mailing and that sort of thing, which shouldn't be much. But have someone basically just send, like through PayPal, request, I print off the labels, I sign them, I number the volumes, I slice them off of the label sheet, I stick them in an envelope. I shouldn't even need to go to the post office, because as long as it's got the right postage, I can just stick it in my mailbox, put the flag up, and it's out the door. And I can keep an Excel file of the individual numbers, so if it turns out that something gets lost in the mail, I can re-sign it for that person with the same number and send out a replacement to them. I think that will be much, much easier to manage. And I've made sure the labels that I have will fit in this area right here. It will fit. So you can center it down here, have it signed, individually numbered on the book plate. So that is indeed coming. It's just probably going to start maybe around the end of January, beginning of February of 2022. I just need to wait a little bit, and then I can really get the ball rolling on that. So, yeah. Not signed on the actual book itself, but signed book plates to include. I was introduced to the idea of book plates way back in the day by actually Kevin J. Anderson. I did an interview with him, and he sent me a signed copy of a book and a ton of book plates, so that I had enough book plates that were signed that if I bought the rest of that book series at some point, I could put book plates signed in every other one to go along with the one that he had hand signed in the actual book itself. So I think it's going to be a good thing. I just have to wait to get the ball rolling on it. The next question comes from Eddie Lex, who asks, Do the new editions include any information about the Duran, I've never known how to pronounce it, I think that's how you pronounce it, Derann, 8mm editions from the UK? I realize these weren't released in the USA, but they really are the hardest home editions to find today. Yes, actually, in a very small sidebar, and since I don't own them myself, there are no pictures of them to go with it. But you will find on page 75 of Volume 1, this little sidebar here, meanwhile in the United Kingdom, 1989, that talks about the release of A New Hope, followed soon after by Return of the Jedi, and then eventually The Empire Strikes Back. But it's basically just a paragraph there in the middle of page 75. But it's not included with like the other Super 8 stuff at the beginning of the book in Chapter 1 because it's actually happening contemporaneously, chronologically, around the time of some of the VHS and Laserdisc release and stuff like that. So it's actually in Chapter 2, The Great Format War, not Chapter 1, Glimmers of Hope. But it's in there, page 75, Volume 1. This brings us to a pair of questions then. The last question is here from Alex Ashbourne. And the first one is actually one that I have already answered. A couple of people also asked the same thing, or didn't ask, they like requested it. So it's not really a question to answer, but because it's asked here by Alex, I'll briefly address it again, but if you want a bigger explanation for it, then you'll need to see the previous Q&A. So he has, I have 2 questions for your books. The first one is the one that relates back to something already asked and answered in the previous Q&A. He says, are you thinking of doing an audiobook version of A Saga on home video? The answer, as detailed in much greater depth back in the previous Q&A, is no. That's very, 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 very unlikely to happen. I would not want to farm this out to someone else to do it. I would want it to be in my own voice, which means me being the one to record it. The chances of me having the time anytime in, the next several years to actually sit down and record almost 1,000 pages of text into audiobook format is extremely unlikely, to the point of almost absurd. Just not going to happen. Even then, though, it doesn't make sense for the way the book is formatted. It is a very image-intensive book, which you wouldn't get with an audio version. There are over 1,500 pictures across the 3 volumes. You wouldn't get any of that in an audio format. There are also tons of sidebars. What would have to happen to them? They break up the narrative flow. Do they exist at all in an audio version? Do they get added elsewhere? If they don't exist, it's not exactly a matching version, which means it's tougher to actually get it to be approved through Amazon's version of audiobook publishing, which is how I publish the books themselves. And on top of that, you got the footnotes where I add extra information or snarkiness from time to time, which, again, break up the narrative flow. How would they be read if it was done as audio? You take the pictures, the footnotes, the sidebars, and the sheer lack of time and the fact that I would have to and want to be the person actually doing the reading. Combine that together, audiobook version would not happen. There's more information in the other one as to why someone else perhaps wouldn't be able to do so as well. But suffice to say, the answer to that one is no. And unfortunately, I'll have to say the same thing for number 2. Number 2 asks whether it is possible for me to create a Wikipedia-style website based on the book. That will not happen. Again, I don't have a whole heck of a lot of time to be able to dive into something like that. If I was going to do that, it would have been in place of A Saga on home video, not in addition to. If you want that information, here it is. If you want to see other stuff not covered in here or covered in sidebars, like especially UK stuff and whatnot, then you can check out Chris Clark's StarWarsHomeVideo.com. There are other sites that are starting to dabble in showing this kind of stuff, but I'm just not a fan of the wiki style presentation. You got the fact that other people can come in and change the information. And oftentimes, especially in collecting communities, what gets changed wrongly. Someone has some erroneous belief out there, they add it, or they change something that's correct to show the bullshit, and then it's a wrong site. And whoever it is that's running the site, to some degree, carries some responsibility for it, unless they are constantly checking and keeping an eye on all these various edits that are happening. Let's see. We also have the fact that, if it is a wiki, it also is something that exists purely online. So you don't have the physical backup of it. You don't have the ability to carry it in physical form. What if the site eventually goes away? There are sites, and you might say, well, Wikipedia doesn't go away. Wikipedia doesn't go away. Yeah, that's true. But there are other sites that have disappeared that have been very, very useful that are just gone. I play some board games, for instance, where there are websites that used to be essential sources of information about those games from the creators that are just gone. Company went out of business, the website's gone. A lot of this crucial information just isn't there, so fans are having to try to piece it back together again. So the idea of something that is a purely online thing isn't big for me. That's why my Star Wars Timeline Gold was always in downloadable form, not as a website. Right? That's a big part of the reason, was so that it exists in something that can be downloaded and kept and not have to worry about the vagaries of whether the website is still going to exist or not. And I've tried wiki stuff before. We actually did a Star Wars home video, or excuse me, a Star Wars fan audio wiki at one point. Didn't really continue for very long, kind of clunky and a pain to edit. And this was back when I was really heavy into doing that stuff. So you combine all that stuff together, I don't see a wiki version of this type of thing happening. If somebody else were to do a wiki type thing about it, they certainly could. It's kind of a good idea for someone to do it. But I would expect if they were using A Saga on Home Video as a source, that they'd be citing it extensively if they were using it extensively, and all the images are copyrighted to me. I took them, all 1,500 plus, so they would not be able to use my images without permission. Nor would they be able to even really get their hands on them unless they were doing some scanning or they had to, doing a lot of cropping with screen captures or something. So I would not see an audiobook version coming of A Saga on Home Video. I would not see a wiki-type version of it. If you want the information, get the book. If you don't want the information in book form, watch from the Star Wars Home Video library. A wiki version of this information, at least from me, is not in the cards. So a nice mixture here, I guess, of disappointing answers and answers that perhaps were uplifting in terms of, hey, you really can get signed stuff to go with this. So with that, we will wrap up this Q&A episode. As I said, if you have other questions, feel free to post them in the comments. I'll just be answering them as I go in the comments rather than in another video like this one. Unless there's just a ton of them, in which case I may do a third video, but I somewhat doubt it at this point. Then again, the hardbacks aren't in my possession yet. The finished versions, as opposed to the author proof copies, aren't in my hands yet. That'll be in about a week or so. So who knows? Maybe there'll be enough questions to justify doing another video, and I can show you those hardbacks at the same time. We will just have to see. But for now, just post them in the comments, and we'll see where it goes from here. So thank you all for your questions. Thank you for your interest in watching this video about A Saga on Home Video. Thank you for your interest in the book itself. Again, is available in Kindle, paperback, and hardback forms on Amazon.com. In other regions, it does tend to vary which formats are available. Most regions will have all three available, but check Amazon in your particular region. Again, the price point is $14.99 for Kindle, $29.99 for paperback, $59.99 for the luxury premium color hardback, and again, that is across the board per volume costs. So buy responsibly, but hopefully you'll enjoy it. And if you do enjoy it after picking up a copy, hey, might be nice to post a review over on Amazon to help me out in that regard as well. So thank you all for your interest in the Saga on Home Video. Thank you for your questions, and may the Force be with the home video viewers and the Saga on Home Video readers.